I don't know yet.
I ain't got no rules.
I'm starting without them. Call to order the 894th meeting of the Director of MSAD27.
Keith DeJandro.
Here.
Isabel Lozier. Abigail Cooler.
Here.
Toby Jandro.
Here.
Barry Willett. Here. Gary Sibley. Sarah Ashley.
Here.
And our two student reps are not here at this time.
Adjustments to the agenda.
Yeah, and you should have a new agenda on your table. It does have 4 adjustments, and I apologize. These came through this morning that we had to act on. Under items of business, new business, resignation, we're going to add a number 2 DRMS social studies teacher. Under items of business, new business, resignation, we're going to add an item 3, continuing education secretary. Under items of business, new business, transfers, add a continuing education literacy position. And then under items of business, new hires, add an item 4, Tops Academy learning facility.
Approval of minutes.
So moved.
Toby?
Second. Superintendent.
Do we want to vote on
Oh, sorry. All in favor?
that? First thing I just want to acknowledge publicly is that we have some board members who have their terms renewed. Seems like you all like the pay so much that you're back for another round. So congratulations to Keith, Abby, Isabel, and Sarah for being reelected to the board.
Highly competitive race.
Yes. Under DOE news and updates, the biggest update is the notification we got last week, excuse me, that the American Rescue Plan Act, which is roughly $411 million that has been allocated to the state of Maine. Out of that 411, 10% goes directly to the department to do some department work. So the remaining 370 goes out to the districts. They're calling this allocation Sr3, and for MSAD27's allocation of Sr3 is $1,804,231.76. The stipulations are very similar to what they were for our CARES funds and our Sr1 and 2, except for the fact that this one comes with a 20% provision, 20% of that allocation. So 20% for us is about $370,000, must go directly towards addressing the achievement gap created by COVID-19. And this is for any school district who is getting these funds. That 20% applies to all school districts. So I did attach, when we sent out the information to you, some information so you can see the details of the American Rescue Act plan. They do have a comparison sheet to previous allocations in the ESSER and ESSER2, so that you can kind of go through those. Very, very similar. You need to have a COVID-19 related expense. It has to be, aligned to the pandemic. It's a lot of money. Luckily, we have the entire 2021 and 2022, 2021-22 and 2022-23 school year to use those funds. I believe the deadline is September 2023 for Sr3. So we're going to be brainstorming. There's a couple of ideas that we have tonight that we'd like to go over with you, specific to addressing those learning gaps. I'm going to call on Mr. Netto to speak later on some of that. So I hope that we can come up with a good plan. I do want to let you all know that I have resubmitted my proposal to the department for an expanded space at Fort Ken Elementary School for gym space. I think that is really important, and we had a presentation. Giselle and I were involved in a superintendent's workshop last Friday, and they did have somebody present from the superintendent's national level, and she alluded to the fact that construction projects are a little more flexible in this round of funding. So we'll see how it goes, and then we'll see if we can get some of these needed projects done. We do also want to look at, if we can, you'll see the budget later, and we do have some construction things that are going into this budget that we want you to consider. We'll see if there's any flexibility with these funds as well, with regards to some of the improvements that we need to make at the building. One of those will be to finish the windows at Fort Ken Elementary School. We've done A wing and C wing. We'd like to target B wing in this round as well, and then look at some different ideas that are floating around. So that's the biggest announcement that I wanted to share with you from the department. Next item I have is state assessment for spring 2021. Just wanted to solidify, I had alluded to it a couple of other times, that the state assessment was changing for the main DOE, and they have signed a contract with the Northwest Education Assessment, which is NWEA. We used to have NWEA in this district years ago as our progress monitoring tool. It's a test that we give all learners in the fall and in the winter and then spring. Now the state is going to be providing this assessment to us, and they're going to be asking that we assess our students in the fall and in the spring. What's different about NWEA compared to past state assessments is it's not a one-size-fits-all assessment. In fact, it's an intuitive assessment where the student sits in front of a computer. It'll assess math separate from reading language arts. But if you're sitting for your math assessment, it's essentially going to ask you a question, and based on how you do on that question, it'll adjust and get more difficult if you're doing well, and get easier if you're struggling. So it is a progress monitoring assessment that measures the learner against themselves, and that's what the department's trying to really move towards, is getting some data that it will give baseline data according to norms. So it will give grade level norms on how a student does, but they are very interested in seeing how students achieve throughout a course of a year or 2 or 3. So the data from that will be useful. Hopefully the state will stick with it for many years, so we have many years worth of data. We haven't had that in the state assessment now for over 6 years, I think, since the last time we had some prolonged data on one assessment. So that's the state assessment. We will actually be looking to do the state assessment starting testing the window starts mid-April in a couple weeks and goes right to the end of the year. So we'll be lining those up and assessing students in grades 3 to 8 and grade 11. And the assessment is no cost to the district because the state is funding it. Any questions with that? All right, the next thing I have is just a curriculum update for you all, and I will share something on my screen so that we can all see what's happening. When you think of assessment, and I know we haven't had a chance to talk about assessment, of curriculum. We haven't had a chance to talk about curriculum for a little while. It's important that we understand that when we're talking about curriculum, we're not talking about a set program that's being used at a certain grade level. There are curriculum resources that we use, and I will have the administrators talk about those in a little bit. But when we're talking about curriculum, we're actually talking about the set of standards that we ask our students to learn and to know in order for us to determine if they're proficient or doing struggling or doing well. This is from the Maine Department of Education, their learning results page. And the main learning results essentially are the state of Maine's guidelines for what schools should follow with regards to curriculum. So I'm just going to go into the K-12 strand here, and you'll see that it pops up different, and I'm in mathematics right now, so it pops up the different mathematical content reasoning areas. Just for the sake of argument, I'm going to go into geometry. So the document that the state has does place the standards according to grade level, and they're using the Common Core coding. So it is based on the Common Core, which is the national standards. Then the Maine Department of Education adopts their own version of that. And then from this, our district adopts our own version of it so that it's understandable to our staff. This is our working document when we're looking at adjusting our own local curriculum, and we go to the state document. So you'll see that it has the grade levels, and then it'll have a standard, it'll have the coding, and it will have what students should understand with regard to those standards. And this is a great resource that we revisit from time to time when we're adjusting ours. For us locally, at MSAD27, our curriculum is embedded right now in Empower, and we are actually working to move what's in Empower to, correct me if I'm wrong saying this, Sharon, is Sharon here? We're moving it to Google Classroom.
Just middle school and high school.
Middle and high school. So that we can use different tools to see the curriculum, so that we don't have to, if we're using Google Classroom for the majority of our middle and high school learners, we want to be able to have quick access to it. We can still go to Empower, but we want to house it in different places. But right now, today, this is where it lives in Empower. So I'm going to go in and just show you how this works. So the curriculum is embedded in what's called the target browser in Empower. And I'm sorry if that's small, but you can see the different content areas here. So all of our different content areas are here. I'm going to go to math just because it's more familiar to me. And you'll see the different grade level categories here. If I select all, it's pretty overwhelming because it shows me all standards for all math, for all grade levels, and that's a little overwhelming. But when you do it by one category at a time, so I just clicked on FL, which is foundational level. This is essentially what your pre-K kindergarten students are learning with regards to foundational skills. And we do it by the strand. So we have the algebra strand, geometry, measurement data, number and quantity. And if I hover over the indicator here, it'll just basically tell me what that standard is. So in kindergarten, our pre-K learners recognize and draw shapes of having specified attributes. That's one of our learning standards that we want them to learn. Moving on from foundational is our early elementary benchmark. So we're talking about grade 1, grade 2 primarily. And again, you see there's only one geometry standard for those grade levels, but there's more measurement and data or number and quantity. Learners use place value to understand properties to add within 1,000. In any one of these standards, a teacher or a parent or a learner can click on what that standard is, and they will see the proficiency levels and the description of what learners are able to do at each one of these levels. So in order to be proficient, which is the level 3, we want our learners to add up to 4 two-digit numbers, add within 1,000, because that's the standard. It's going to take a while for a learner to do that. So we're going to start slow. We're going to start here at the level 1. And at a level 1, we want students to fluently add within 20, then add multiples of 10, then add two-digit numbers within 100. And you can see that we can build throughout the progressions of the learning target. This is why proficiency is more about building those skills and less about grading kids based on where they are. We always want to build them from where they are and take them where they need to go. The teachers also have at the elementary level checklists within each learning target, not all of them, but a large majority of them. So we can see smaller chunks of learning targets to build towards proficiency. If I were to go back to the Common Core or to the main learning results, each one of these would be its own standalone standard we wanted to make our standards a little more hierarchy with progressional steps so that we can build those standards that equal out to a greater standard, if you will, or a power standard. And it makes really good sense because you can organize it in a way that makes sense to the students. So if you're having conversations with learners in a classroom, you might say, hey, are you working on target A or target B? And those students should be able to express that where they are to you at that time. So this is essentially where our standards lie, and this is what we, what we talk about. What's really nice is if I were to bring up a learner's target browser, you would actually see what they've achieved on these standards. So if they're at a 2.5 level, it would say 2.5 over that standard, or it would say 3, or it would say 4 based on how they've done. Or it might say AP, which is an auto place, because some learners, like my daughter, came here at this district at grade 4. So her teachers had to figure out where she was before grade 4. And they did that quickly by assessing and then auto placing. So you see APs for a lot of students. That's because, for the reason I just shared, or you've achieved a higher standard and we never had a lower standard that is related to that. So we're just going to auto place it because obviously if you know this one, you had to know this one. So you'll see APs. But through the grade level, so now we're moving to upper elementary. This is grades 3, 4, 5. You see where the spread is. Middle school, so 6, 7, 8, and then high school, 9 through 12. You start to see a different icon, and when you start to get to high school, there's a couple of middle school standards too. It changes from a lightning bolt to a graduation hat. The ones with graduation hats, our students have to get those standards in order to graduate because they're required graduation standards. So for this one here with the lightning bolt, a student could achieve only at a level 2.0 and be okay. For the ones with the hats, they have to achieve at least a 2.5 in order to get that ultimately get that graduation credit. And then beyond that, we have beyond graduation. So those are our higher level maths that are not required for graduation, but we do have some learners who do go into calculus, who do go into those advanced math, and they have standards for those as well. Now, I don't know if you guys had a chance to look at your admin reports, but I know that your principals did share some of the new resources that we have in the schools to address these, to address our curriculum needs. John, I don't know if you want to just highlight some of the new curriculum materials you have in this building.
Sure. We in our math curriculum have over the last few years switched over to Pearson, which is called Envision. Okay, and it has a digital component which turned out to be really important during our remote phase, because teachers were able to, share that with their students. And the curriculum is kind of interesting as far as it doesn't just teach, like the usual categories of algebra, geometry, and then algebra 2, and in that order. It kind of spirals them every year, so it's called an integrated curriculum. So every year there's some algebra, there's some geometry, there's some statistics as well, as it kind of spirals around. So we've been using that for 2 years now. And this year we were able to purchase it's kind of sister curriculum for our middle school. Okay, so that it's from Asbestos, which is, I guess that's what Pearson is just kind of transitioned into a publishing company. And so that's very similar. We're able to, and we just actually started this, I think it was right in time. We got this curriculum through COVID funds that we were able to get them just as we got into December. So that was all set up, so our teachers were able to use that while we were going with remote learning. And they seem to like it a lot. So then right now in social studies, we're also, for middle school, we're in the midst of, with ESSER 2 funds, we're trying to purchase the Sabbath curriculum for middle school. But, at this time, it's more teacher-created curriculum, that they created playlists on Empower, quite a few of our groups. High school social studies, we've freshman and sophomore year, it's more of a teacher-created curriculum. Economics and American government, both with the Sabbath curriculum that Mr. Dorman's been using for several years. Really enjoys that curriculum. Of course, that's just a basis for the curriculum, but, and creates a lot of its activities, by himself as well. I would say, you create your own curriculum. If you're passionate about it, you're going to give your passion and, hopefully engage your students. I think that's a great combination. Also, for some new curriculum, we just got the Curiosity Place. We restructured our middle school science. We found that our science was being taught 6th grade life science, and then it was 7th grade was more physical science, 8th grade was more earth science, and then they had another year of earth and space freshman year, and then life science again, bio in 10th grade. So we found it was a long time to go, and not that physical science and earth science isn't a lot of fun, but kids always associate life science, bio. So the new curriculum that we got, this Curiosity Place, it kind of does the same thing. It's about a third of the year with life science, a third of the year, this is for all middle school, 6th grade up, is earth science, and a third of the year is physical science. So they're getting a little bit of this every year, and then it builds upon itself, so that, when they get to high school, they've had a really good smattering of all three of the major sciences by the time that they get there. So this is our first year with that curriculum, and they're updating their online component that's supposed to be brand new next year. We get that, even though we purchased it last year, we're getting that online component as part of the deal. So that's textbooks and the online component for the science. And then in the high school with science, it's more or less all of our teachers have created their own curricula based on the standards. There's content standards, in earth and space science, bio, chem, physics, but there's also 8 processing standards that they work on throughout, like, creating experiment, creating carrying out experiments, being able to analyze data, using the evidence that they find in their experiments. That's all done every year. So by the time they graduate, they need to get through all of those process standards. Okay, so the last major area I left out was ELA, and ELA is those are those standards are covered every year. Generally, the 9th and 10th grade are pretty similar. We spiral. And the same thing with the grades 11 and 12 with senior projects coming in at senior year. And every year they need to read 6 books or novels throughout the year, and they're tested on for comprehension as well. And in all of our other visual arts, foreign languages, health, PE, those are all, taught according to the standards, all teacher created curriculum.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And those programs that we were able to get through CRF funds or ESSER funds, we definitely had to tie in the fact that we needed to meet the needs of our in-classroom learners and our remote learners. So a lot of our newer curriculum resources do have the online component, just so that those kids from home can access the online books and that kind of thing. Mr. Neto, did you want to highlight?
Yes, I would.
Your the new curriculum resources that we were able to secure at the elementary school?
Yeah, so, and I mean, kind of timing really played a great role in this. We saw a need a couple years ago for a new reading curriculum at the elementary school. In back in 06, 07, they had purchased the Reading Street program by Scott Forsman. There was grants available. I'm not sure what the name of the grant was. That was a little bit before my time, especially at the elementary level. But everybody was aligned with that one curriculum. There was a scope and sequence that was spiraling, like John talked about. Over the past 13 years, a lot of those materials and a lot of those strategies have kind of dissipated a little bit. We closed a couple schools where the people came in when we brought in those teachers back into the Port Elementary School. We have teachers that don't have any of the program, but yet we were a Regent Street school. So we saw the need to, and looking at our data, we saw the need to have something a little bit more consistent amongst everybody. So we purchased the MyView program, which is also by Asbestos Learning, formerly Pearson. So MyView is great. It has a lot of great online resources. It also comes with a workbook for every student. So if we do go to remote, every student has that workbook. That workbook has the readings, has the guided reading questions, has everything really that they need for the teacher to be able to facilitate in an online environment, as well as, you know, over the screen, but the student still has that tangible physical stuff to write on. Look at the younger grade levels, particularly K-2, they need to be writing, they need to be doing those types of things. So the digital component is great, but we really needed something that would work for kids to have in their hands as well. So for K-3, we have the MyView program. The other option that we had for our 4 and 5 learners was something called Amplify, which is a CKLA program. What really turned them onto that program was the informational text. Very rich, very informational, very engaged to the students and what their interests are. I mean, you guys know every day in your work, a lot of it is informational text, and we felt that there was a gap there as well. And then going into grade 6, kind of lining up with John with some of the status products as well. So that's really what we looked at for our reading program, knowing historically that, you know, we had some scores that we felt that we could bring up by being more consistent and having that program for our teachers to be able to teach. Also, having the online component, having those workbooks really took a lot of weight off the teachers' shoulders as they were preparing this for remote learning. This year we did a soft rollout of that, which really means that, you know, teachers that are comfortable with the materials that they had for the Scott Schwarzman or Regent Street materials were able to continue that. Teachers that wanted to jump in and dive into the MyView were able to. The majority of our teachers did. Same thing with the Amplified and CKLA, and we've had really good results. We do know that there's some places where you may have to supplement, but that's with any program you'll have that. Maybe it might be weak on vocab, so you get supplemental vocab materials, but the writing is much more impressive with the MyView than it was with the Regent Street. So each program has its benefits, but we're very happy with the program right now. Next year, we're going to be doing a full rollout, full implementation of the MyView reading program and CKLA. So I'm anxious to see how that goes. We have our early implementers that are going to be able to help. We have another option we'll be talking about later that I think is going to be a really big benefit to our staff and our teachers. Math, a little less. We have had the Eureka program. With the feedback from Eureka is very different. We did do a survey last year with, you know, what are the best parts about Eureka, what are the parts that you could do without, that type of thing. And the survey results came back, and you couldn't pick and choose any theme there in terms of the positives and the negatives. Everybody seemed to like something different about it. Everybody seemed to dislike different things about it. So we also decided to look at a new math curriculum. The math curriculum we purchased was Into Math. We had some experience, and anybody that has a remote learner right now in the K-5 would know Go Math. So the Into Math, Go Math is basically being no longer supported after this year. That's what we wanted, because we had seen the Go Math from, which is what Madawaska has, and we really liked it. Go Math. And then Into Math is the new, basically the next Go Math. So that's what's going to be supported from here on out. That's the program that we did get. We do have the program. We have the materials that go with it. A little bit wary about, you know, asking our teachers to implement 2 programs fully in 1 year, particularly with everything else we're adding on to them. So we're doing the reading program next year fully with a soft rollout and some early implementers of the math program, with a plan for the 2022-23 school year being fully implementing a new math program.
And Sharon, did you want to explain what you're doing on your end with regards to?
Yeah, if you go on the far left, I don't have my glasses, but it says VUESD content standards. It's right there, isn't it? And so what I'm trying to do is house all the standards in there. So it'd be a one-stop shop for parents, but in addition to the standards being there, what I'm doing is providing the sequence of learning and matching up standards, because when you're looking in Power, let's just say MA.4, MA.5, MA.6, logically you would think that that's the sequence that they're the progression of learning, but it's not. So what I'm trying to do, if you go to math standards, and 3 to 5 right now is in draft form, but you can see basically, if you scroll down and open up that, just open up the whole page.
This one?
So what I'm doing is, for the sake of, the pink column is 3rd grade, the middle column is 4th, and the far one is 5th. The Empower standard is MA.7. I just write the standard, but then I also find the correlated standard in, so the MA.4, and I list the Common Core standards. So to be able to get to that 5th grade far right standard, those are the standards in regards to Common Core that need to match up. And then the learning targets are aligned to the Common Core standards as well. So when you go down, you can see learning target A, what is the Common Core? So I'm doing that. And then additionally, I'm adding what are those foundational skills that students need to do even at the 3rd grade level for them to be able to do some of these skills that are listed a little bit higher. So I'm taking all of the standards and I'm matching them up by skill set based on the progression that they're in, and how a teacher would teach them, as opposed to how they're lined up in Empower. So I've done that. ELA is complete all the way from pre-K all the way to beyond graduation, where it's broken up in individual clusters. I'm moving on to the math, and then I'll be doing each of the other content areas as well. So it takes a little bit of time because I have to find the matching correlating standards that would be appropriate.
So one thing that we did different this year is we separated our elementary and high school leadership teams, curriculum leadership teams, and then brought all the elementary leadership teams together from the 3 districts for elementary, and then the same thing for middle high school. And it's been wonderful because we get to talk more about the standards that need to be adjusted. We talk about curriculum being a living, breathing thing, and when we find out we have gaps in learning based on assessment data that we get, and Mr. Neto highlighted one of them for informational text. Our data tells us we do not hit on informational text very well across the district. So addressing that through new curriculum resources was really important to us. So the leadership teams have been really good about meeting, talking about what needs to be addressed, and we adjust accordingly. And it has been a living, breathing document for the past 5-6 years now. So we're very proud of the work that we've done with the curriculum. And now with the new resources to match, where we're going, the department has refined a lot of these learning results, and you have to stay with the new curriculum resources in order to stay ahead of it. Our years of trying Eureka Math, it was great when the Common Core first came out, and now that it has adjusted into something new, Eureka Math was no longer meeting our needs, so we have to adjust accordingly. So that's just a little bit of information, probably more than you wanted on this Monday night, but we just wanted to make sure that you had a little update on the work we're doing with regards to curriculum. Any questions on that?
Are we able to see in the aggregate how our students are reaching the goals set forth in this?
In Empower, we can do that. Sharon, did you want to?
Yeah. So in Empower, you can see how students are doing within each of the standards and the clusters. And the assumption is in a normal year that all the standards would be covered, so there should be a number in there. What I'm hoping to do is we were going to use Empower for our transcript, and that's just not going to, at the high school, it's just not going to work because they can't round down to the 0.1, it's to the 0.5, and it's just not accurate enough for us. But what we can do is those essential learning targets that we talked about last year, is we can identify those clusters, the essential targets, and we can create graduation requirements within each of the clusters. And then we can see how students are progressing with those essential targets and determine their pacing. So in here, the pacing is what determines how the students are doing in regards to the standards for their grade level. So it doesn't necessarily give you, I mean, when you do those graduation requirements per cluster, you will get an aggregate. You will get an average score of how they are doing on the overall standards, but there's some standards, because they're so essential, we want the students to get a 2.5 or a 3, especially if we know that they're not revisiting it in the next cluster. So those essential targets are the ones that we're saying, yep, they're good with the 2 even on this standard, because we know they're going to be reviewing and revisiting it, but they need to master addition and subtraction in second grade. That's really something that's very important, because the fluency needs to be there for grade 3. And if they're not, then we need to do some skills, remediation with those students to be able to get them up to par.
What's nice from a teacher level is you can pull up a standard that you're teaching for your classroom, and you can see where all your students fall on that progression. How many of them are at a level 1 in that standard, 2, 2.53, so you can see where they all are. And they'll actually indicate the students' names on each of them, so it's really nice. You know who to push and then who to move on beyond.
And that's the beauty of the Empower program, is it provides a continuum of learning that follows the student. So if I'm the 5th grade teacher, I can see how a student did in kindergarten, in 1st grade, 2nd grade, and then if I see some issues, I can say, well, they never really mastered this. That explains it. So that record follows the student. Where in the past, you had a paper document that housed in a file, you would have to go get their CUNY file, you would read it, and this is just at your fingertips.
So I guess if we wanted to see like the state sets a 5th grade expectation.
Yep.
If I wanted to see if we were meeting the 5th grade expectation, I don't want to see any particular kids' names. Would it be possible to see how our 5th grade scoring in comparison with what the state expects?
Oh, in regards to the standards themselves? Yeah, it would definitely take some work to separate all of that. I'd have to go in and pull the exact standards, because the state has this plethora of standards, which is really not a realistic goal for all our students or any student to be able to do all of those standards. So what we've done is narrowed it down to the essentials. So we could pull out what we've identified and match them up and see if they're on par.
I think an easier way to get what Toby's referring to would just be look at STAR data. You
Yes.
look at our progress monitoring, because that's all aligned to state standards.
But that's kind of where I was going. Like, I understand STAR is a thing, but STAR is different than this.
Yeah.
Like it exists in its own world.
But aligned to the same standards.
Well, yeah, but it doesn't exist in the whatever. Empower. Yeah.
Empower is day-to-day work that teachers are doing with their students. STAR data is meant to really be diagnostic.
Mhm.
So yeah, you could get that information for sure.
Or the new state assessment, that'll do the same thing. Yep. Any other questions? The last thing I have, I got an email the other day, Spirit of America recognition, and it had a whole list of different main groups, and I scrolled down and saw that Fort Kent Community High School was one of the main 2020 Spirit of America Foundation Education Tribute Award recipients for their Winter Carnival food drive for collecting over 5,000 items. I wrote to Mr. Collette and Mr. Doucette and said, is this a real thing? And they said, yes, it is. So I did want to just let you know that we did get that recognition. I don't know if we get anything more than just the email, but it's kind of cool. We're on the website, so it's kind of cool. So I didn't want to just let you know that we did get that.
We're working on beating that this year, so.
Yeah, nice. Awesome. And then your administrator reports were included in your packets.
Okay, so we'll move on to committee reports.
Just want to remind the negotiations committee that we do have negotiations set up for this Wednesday, April 7th. Keith, Toby, Barry are on the negotiating team. We've set it up so that we can try to get it done in a day, and if not, we'll take a backup date. But we are negotiating the bus driver custodian group first, followed by the food service personnel second, and then the administrative or secretary group 3rd. So Giselle has been very active in updating some language that needs to go in, as well as Lucy for earned paid leave and different things to align with law. So what I'd like to propose, if you can try to be here, negotiations start at 9. If you can be here earlier, 8:30, the latest, we can go over some of the language proposals that we would like to put in there, and then begin from there once we're ready. I have reserved the conference room across from Mr. Doucette and Mr. Coletta's office. The conference room is ours for the day, so that's where we'll be meeting for that. So just wanted to put that out there. We've also got an intent notification to negotiate with the teacher group. We have to do that one as well when we finish up these Teamster negotiations, and then we also have the ed techs. So it's going to be a busy spring, and hopefully we can find time that's going to work for all of you to get that done. And I understand if it can't be always done during the workday, we'll go around your schedule to make sure that works. Anything I'm missing, Giselle, Lucy? And then policy committee, we met on Monday, March 22, and we went over some policies. You should have them in your packet. And this is a first read, so this is more just for your information, and if you spot anything today, we can make sure that we adjust it for next time. The first policy is the employee use of social media and social networking. It should be policy GCSA-S. This is a policy that we've had in place for a couple of years. I think we adopted it in 2018. And we just wanted to make sure that we went over it and we're sure that it meets our needs, except for some minor typos throughout page 1. We do have some, and I'm sorry, your copies are hard to read where the changes are. You can see the font is a little bit lighter. It's where the new additions are. On page 204 in the second paragraph, there's a sentence there. As employees or contractors at MSAD27, the expectation is that there will be no disparaging remarks, photos, etc. on social media sites reflecting MSAD27. We've added TikTok to the line of different social media platforms that people are using. That seems to be more popular than ever. And we did, on the last page, you'll see that we're eliminating item number 12. It seemed to be a little bit not preachy, but it seems to be common sense. We eliminated on number 13, don't pick fights, just because, again, we're professionals. I don't think we do that. And then we eliminated number 14, but added at number 15, avoid personal opinions that may be interpreted as offensive to others who are reading them, including opinions that are political, religious, controversial, and otherwise insulting in nature. So that is a new item, number 15, that we'd like to put in there. Again, first read, so the policy committee did go over it, and they were okay with these changes. But if you spot something else, please let me know for sure.
Do we want to just add on number 10, like, or other social media platforms that will probably arise?
For future, for others, yeah. I'll add something to that.
Is that a MySpace one?
LinkedIn.
Any questions on that one?
Yearbook, is that one? Classmates, that was a classmates.
What was it when we were in college? It was the UMS chat system?
Yeah,
UMS chat, yeah. That was,
yeah. I remember getting hit up to go on classmates.com. That existed for like a year before MySpace took over.
Yeah.
Way back in the old days.
the second one is staff gifts and solicitations, code GBI. Not a whole lot of change, except for the solicitation section. In that second paragraph, we've added some language specific to gathering signatures. So no MSAD27 employees may solicit funds or signatures of staff members within the schools during the regular school day. This also includes the solicitation of signature for local or state election. I did reach out to MSMA on the best place to put this kind of language, and I was directed to this policy because it does deal with solicitations, and so I think that's a good fit for where that goes. That was the only suggestion on that one. And then the last one is our graduation requirements. What has happened with our graduation requirements is we had several years of transitional language. The class of 2018 was doing this, class of 2019 was doing that, 2020 was doing this. Now we have everyone on the same track. So we've eliminated a lot of that transitional language. We've also eliminated any language that alluded to the fact that we award a proficiency-based diploma. We do not award a proficiency-based diploma. We still award a credit-based diploma based on proficiencies that students demonstrate. So this is when the law changed and allowed schools to not pursue the proficiency-based diploma. Many schools like us who were very deep into proficiency work, we said, we don't want to let this go to waste, but we also acknowledge the fact that a proficiency-based diploma is really, is going to be really hard to achieve for all learners. So we've stuck with the credit-based system. So you can see that second paragraph was language about a PBE diploma. This first paragraph of the first sentence of section 1 also talked about a PBE diploma. You can see on page 2 of 7, we've reduced our required credits from 24.5 to 22, and there's a really good reason for that. It's not because we're making it easier. So I'll have Mr. Collette explain why that is.
Sure. We were on trimesters for a number of years, and some courses it would take 2 trimesters, or some would be 1 trimester, some would be 3. So when we switched over to semesters again, having 2 semesters in a year, we were giving full credit for a 1 semester course. Okay, so it didn't really make sense. So what we needed to do is everything that was a 1 semester class is now a half credit, and everything that's a 2 semester class is a full credit. So we have only 6 periods, during a day, which will allow you to get 6 credits at the end of the year. So 6 times 4 is 24, which means that for you to graduate with the right number of credits, you would have to have a full boat every year, no study halls, nothing. So this way we still allow, you to take 5 credits a year, and this gives you enough room to graduate, on time with 22 credits, since we changed the whole thing from, a half a credit per semester and 1 credit per year. So it does make sense. And the state average is much lower, I believe, it's at 18.
16 for the state diploma. So again, I think that's pretty clear. Trimesters, we were awarding a credit for 1 trimester class on some occasions, some for 2 trimesters, and some for 3, and they just were not all equal. So Mr. Coletta worked to make things all equal. So 1 semester course, half a credit, a full year course, 1 credit, and everything is across the board equal. Aside from that, the only other language that we needed adjusting was the section 2 community service requirements. We have put some transition language because of COVID-19. It made it very difficult it would be very difficult for our students who are graduating this year and next year to meet those community service requirements. So for the class of 2022, it's set to 15 hours because of the 1.5 years of COVID restrictions. And then for 2023, it's at 25, and then it adjusts back to the full requirement of 30 hours after that. We added some language to the homeschool item C on page 5. Homeschool students may be required to take a benchmark assessment upon return to CHS to determine if courses completed during the homeschool will earn credit. And this is specific to a game that we see being played at the high school level. when some students are jumping in and out of a homeschool placement, when things get a little tough here, they jump out, finish their year at a homeschool placement, then come back the next year, and amazingly, they're now a sophomore. And then the same thing happens at the end of sophomore year, and then they come back, and amazingly, I'm a junior. So when we see this kind of mobility, it's important that we have a benchmark assessment to assess whether or not the homeschool program had the same rigor that we offer here and place those students in the correct placement. This does not change anything with those homeschool programs that do it right. And when I say do it right, if you are a homeschool parent, you agree to have your child assessed at the end of the homeschool year. So there are different ways you can do that. One of them is a portfolio that's gone over by a certified teacher. Another one can be a panel of different people. You can have a certified teacher come into your home and assess all the work that your child did. So there's some different ways. If you do it that way, there's no problem there. You know, you had a certified teacher certify that your work was complete. That's fine. You don't need to have a baseline assessment. This is more for the ones where they don't do the homeschool program exactly the way that the department has it identified, and we just need to figure out where to place kids back when they come back. And that's pretty much the changes that we did to that one. So again, if you notice anything, let me know, and we'll go through a second read next time.
So I was thinking about this the other day, and I just wanted to put it up to the board and get some of your feedback. Well, I'm glad we're updating the use of social media, social networking, and solicitations. It struck me that it feels like we're creating the Napoleonic Code. You're probably not familiar with that, but in civil law countries, it's not a problem unless you explicitly write that it's a problem. And it feels like we're creating something akin to that, like the civil law tradition in like Quebec or Louisiana. They use the same program where in the American law, like you just say like, this is bad. And then you figure out if the behavior fits under this umbrella. Whereas the civil law tradition, we have to enumerate every bad act in order for it to be a problem. And I'm just wondering if we want to take a step back and look at kind of more general behavior we're looking to prevent, instead of sitting there and trying to enumerate every possible thing that could be problematic. Did I lose anybody on that?
No, I think what you're saying is maybe just a general hierarchy policy that says use the right judgment.
Yeah, if you're at work, you shouldn't be selling Lula. Like, right? We don't need a policy for that. I'm looking at you, Robert.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't think we need a policy for multi-level marketing stuff. If we just agree that when you're at work, you're going to work, you shouldn't be doing petitions or doing anything. You should be at work. Every job I've had, that's been the deal, except for the current one where I do whatever I want. But I don't know. What do you guys think? It feels like, again, weird whack-a-mole here where we're going to try to chase behaviors that are problematic. I don't know.
I think your profession has created this need over here.
I disagree. I think, well, I mean, Keith, you do labor. I mean, you're part of a union. I mean, how specific are the rules in your job?
As far as social media use?
Yeah.
There's a vague company policy, but I mean, not drilling into details as far as which social media platform, but I mean, you have to always keep in mind there's that level of perception. Well, hey, so-and-so works for XYZ company. Maybe that's the belief of that company. Well, you have to kind of separate yourself from that. Like, hey, this is my opinion. This isn't the opinion of SAD27, even though I'm an employee of SAD27. So I guess if people just step back and realize how things can be perceived, maybe they won't hit enter and comment on that post. So,
Anyway, I'm fine with this, but it just feels like we're very much changing policy to deal with particular issues.
Yeah.
And we're doing it ex post facto. So every time we do something happens and we're like, you shouldn't have done that. Well, we don't have a policy specifically on that particular behavior. It just feels like kind of a weird place to be. when it seems like a general policy saying, look, you come to work, you do your job. You know, like, we shouldn't have to explain that you shouldn't be doing like side jobs at work, right? I've never had that explained to me explicitly in any jobs I've had. Gary, did you have to, was there an express prohibition against doing Amway at the electrician's law?
Oh, it's very much spelled out.
Yeah,
Yes.
really?
Very.
Oh my God.
I can't,
My expectations are too high. I didn't think that would ever happen.
I can't say with regard to the solicitation of signatures, the question that came to me was, am I not allowed to do that?
I think I've given them.
And I think it probably comes to like discipline. You know, like, am I allowed to do that? Well, if it wasn't specific, then, so I think it kind of creates a weird,
But if you're doing that, you're not working.
Yeah.
That's what we're paying for, is do the work.
Right.
I mean, not do petition.
All right, so moving on, items of business.
Okay, before we do that, Mr. Chairman, I do want to let everyone know, I've included the SAD27 vision statement, and I've also included the SAD27 vision statement and mission statement. And I took this to the policy committee and I said, we have 2 vision statements and we have 1 mission statement that I don't think accurately describe who we are and where we're going. So my advice to the policy committee, and I'd like to just get you guys to hopefully agree, I think we need to revisit this with some stakeholder group work. I think it's important that we get an accurate depiction of who we are and where we're going. So this is things that I want to work on in the next few months. If it's all right with you. Okay, thank you. Now we can move on.
Oh, business. MOU for school-based services.
So this is something that we were reviewing just prior to COVID hitting. In the last time, and I went back to the minutes, it was either the January, February meeting prior to COVID. We had gone through some changes proposed in this MOU, and I'm just going to remind everyone, this is for Fish River Rural Health has a mobile unit that that has been serving 33 in Madawaska with some school-based health services specific to mental health counseling and oral services for any for the child of any patient who already goes to Fish River Rural Health. And the whole impetus for this was, why do kids have to leave school for appointments if the appointments can come to them and we can work it into the school day. So Heather at Fish River Rural Health wrote a grant and was successful in the grant writing and has been providing those services, and it's been working well in the other 2 districts. So this year she had the opportunity to kind of expand on that, and then she said, oh yeah, we don't have an MOU with 27. Do we want to have that? And so I dug this up, and I remember the last thing that we wanted included was some language specific to indemnity. Did I say that right?
Indemnity.
Indemnity, thank you. So I have included language specific to that in items 12, which would be the SBH, school-based health center sponsors, and then item 13, which would be our indemnity, so that we're in line with essentially what happens if somebody gets injured. What happens if a Fish River Rural Health nurse gets injured, bringing a student back into class, or what happens if one of our students gets injured while loading into the mobile health unit. We do have the language for that as well. So I guess my question to you is, are we comfortable at this point moving forward with this MOU with Fish River Rural Health? We had changed some other things. I know that you guys didn't want any documentation being distributed at the beginning of the school year. Instead, we said we would have it available. So folks who did want the services could pick it up at school, so we're not going to be handing out, their information. Those were some of the concerns that you had early on.
I think we just need to update the dates.
Update the date. Yeah, it was the last year document.
You need a motion?
So
We have a second.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
A question, sorry.
Mhm.
Is this for 1 year? This is a 1 year thing?
Yeah, 1 year at a time. And then we assess if it meets our needs or not.
What's their frequency of availability?
I think what we'll be doing for Fort Ken Elementary is 1 day a week. They do 1 day a week in Madawaska. I think they do half a day in 33. We talked about just entering with 1 day a week, maybe only half a day. We're gonna go over the caseload and see what the need was. But no more than that.
Anything else? All those in favor? Unanimous. Moving on to Valley Unified Education Service.
And just wanted to let you know that we did bring additional language to the Valley Unified Board at our last meeting, items 11 to 17 of the agreement. And the only, this one doesn't have the markup. The only suggestion that was made, if you look on page 7, items M and items N, it was suggested that perhaps because both of those deal with borrowing for working capital or bonding, that perhaps 7/9 language under the current governance be added for those two items. So I did say that I would note it and then put it in the overall suggestion proposal.
How was that received by the other school boards?
There was no, I didn't get any pushback. I don't believe you did. It was just matter of fact.
I have a question then on one of your emails in March.
Yep.
It was suggested or it was a consideration on moving the service center to Frenchville.
I sent an email.
Is that the central office?
Central.
Central office, yeah.
Oh, it was something that we've been discussing, but we realized that can't happen. So that's not on the table. Thank you. You're welcome.
Technology update?
Last meeting, you all approved us moving forward with hosting a contracted service for IT services and technology integration. After that approval, the very next day, I mentioned to the union, Teamster Union, what our position was going to be, and it quickly came back that if IT was going to be part of any contracted position, IT does belong to the Teamster contract, so that was going to be problematic. We looked back at some old correspondence with the legal team, and although it's possible that we could easily wade through that, it would probably be difficult. So I reached out to Keith in his role as the technology, and serving on the technology committee, and then the chairman, and talked about our alternate plan, which essentially would be to contract just for the technology integration, because it's not part of the contract. And then we had conversations with Deb here, who's our technician, our IT technician in this building, talking about looking at a transition plan to see if she could meet the IT needs of the entire district as our district IT person. It was well received by Deb. She felt that because she has taken on additional responsibilities over the past few years, she manages the JANK inventory systems, and she does that for the district. She felt that she was willing to give it a try, knowing that technology integration, which she does a little bit of in her role, would come off her plate and would go solely on the technology integrator's plate. One thing that the technology integrator we would be asking of this individual would be to do summer IT work, because we always contract for summer IT. So we would have that as an expectation as well. So Chairman did allow me to put an RFP out for that, and we are waiting for bids on that. And I know that we should be getting some very shortly. And then I'll take that to you for further consideration.
SR3.
One thing that I would like to propose or share with you is specific to one way that we can make sure I'm sharing my screen here. As I shared with you earlier, we have to target 20% of our SR3 funds to address the learning gaps that have been created by COVID-19. So one thing that we've been discussing about is, because we do a really good job in this district with intervention services, we have our Title I interventions. We do a really good job with our student support teams to make sure that we refer kids who are falling, so they don't fall between the cracks. We have grade 504 processes, so that those students who qualify for a 504 have those services, and then our special ed department is stellar, and then they do a great job meeting the needs of our IEP kids. But when we're trying to connect the dots of what's the best way that we can help our teachers, our classroom teachers, the ones who are on the front lines, the ones who have the students with them the majority of the day, interventions are great, but a half hour, twice a week intervention is no substitute to a teacher who has greater access to tools and skills that they can use throughout the day, sprinkling throughout the day with this, specific learners. We feel that that's far better way to address learning gaps. So I just want to propose something called student-centered coaching, and it's putting the needs of students front and center. So all the information that I got, I stole from DianeSweeney.com. So if you go to this website, you're going to see a lot of the stuff I have, and I'm admitting it. I did steal from it. So yes, that's where I got my information. So what is student-centered coaching? It's an evidence-based instructional coaching model that shifts the focus from fixing teachers to collaborating with them to design instruction that targets student outcomes. Taking a data-driven approach increases the learning and efficacy of teachers, coaches, and most importantly to our students. So this is totally data-driven. You go through cycles, and I'll explain that in a second, where you're basically looking at what strategies you are using as a coach with the teacher, and how effective those strategies were in order to see growth over that period of time. And why student-centered coaching? COVID-19 has proven to widen the achievement gap. More than ever, we need to focus on effective teaching strategies to target student outcomes with a focus on elementary age learners. I truly believe that our focus right now needs to be with our lower elementary, starting at pre-K, K, maybe 1, maybe 2, but definitely starting with our younger students, so that those baby gaps that they have right now do not turn into wide, huge super gaps by the time they get to Mr. Fleta and Mr. Doucette. So making an investment on those grade levels first is going to be our recommendation in this model. The combination with interventions we have in place, including but not limited to our Title I student support services, will help FKES close the achievement gap, preparing our teachers with data-informed strategies for student success. So how does it work? So this is going to be harder to see, but I'm going to blow up the, oh, I had a slide where I could blow up the middle, but this one's not doing it. So let me just increase it this way. I've asked Mr. Nettle for help here, and that's going to be really embarrassing. Oh, yeah, I won't ask you.
His cousin called me for help this weekend.
Oh, really?
For help, yeah, and I was able to do
Why
it.
can't I pinch to make it bigger? Do you know why, Mr. Nettle?
I don't know, it's probably there.
I find with Google
Okay.
Slides,
No,
when
mine
you do
was
the
right here.
increase, it actually makes it smaller. Oh,
I knew you talked to Mr. Nettle. Oh, okay. Zoom. Sorry, guys. Oh, that's
Well, now I don't know what he's doing.
You told me to. Okay, so there we go. So there are different models of coaching. The most common one is teacher-centered coaching, and I'll get to that in a second. Teacher-centered coaching is really good, but what we're doing here in this proposal is a student-centered. So you're looking at the smaller circle within the three different bands there. And the focus is on partnering to improve the learning. So instead of being an evaluator like Mr. Netto would be, somebody who is the teacher's boss, and they have that evaluator or administrator role and teacher role. This is a partner. This is a coach who's there to assist and provide help, and that's essentially what it is. The use of data, student evidence is used to drive the instruction. So unlike an accountability system, we're looking at the student evidence and we're talking about, okay, this is why this worked, or this is why this didn't work with this learner, and how are we going to adjust. The relationship, the use of materials, the tool that promotes learning for the student in this example here. And again, they're highlighting partner and collaborator, not evaluator. And I think a better way to show this is if I show the two side by side. Oh, I messed up my slides right here. Again, your teacher-centered coach is more like the building principal. Their role is to help the teachers implement instructional programs, whereas a student-centered coach would propel the student and teacher learning. The focus would be from monitoring to partnering. The use of data would be moving away from holding accountability to using what's going to work. And then we're moving from a mentor evaluator to a partner and collaborator in this model. Sharon has taken some classes on this model, and what we would be asking, if you would accept it, Sharon would be more or less the first point of contact for our student-centered coach, because under a curriculum coordinator, it seems very more fluid, that the curriculum coordinator would be able to point that coach into the direction of curriculum resources and what we have access to. And because Sharon does work for 3 districts, we have more resources than ever that we can tap into. We see good teaching practices from across the districts, and especially in this district here, we have some great teachers that do some great things. Sharon would be able to help connect the coach with that. So there are 7 core practices in student-centered coaching. So you utilize the coaching cycles, you set standards and goals, you unpack the goal to learning targets, you co-plan with student evidence, you co-teach using effective instructional practices, you measure the impact, and then you partner with the school leader to make sure that, that the school leader is on board with what's going on. Mr. Netto and Sharon did have a Zoom call earlier this week or last week?
Last week.
This is Monday.
Weeks all rolling together now.
Last week, where they connected with a school district in southern Maine. What was it doing?
It was the RSU, MSAD number 6, which is the Bonnie Eagle, which is a huge district, but the school that we talked to, elementary school, was comparable in size to Fort Kent Elementary.
Hollis Elementary, I think it was,
Okay.
they have 350 kids.
So they've begun using student-centered coaching. in exchange for interventionists. And I don't know if you guys want to highlight some of the conversations that you had from that.
Yeah, I mean, just the ability for them to really get those early interventions in, particularly tier 1, tier 2. They were able to eliminate a lot of their special ed referrals. The Title I type referrals have really come up, but I'm assuming that if you're eliminating a lot of your special ed referrals, you're also eliminating some of your Title I referrals as well. So really good data from that point of view. Also, in terms of the teachers, they're working collaboratively with the teachers. So it, in essence, takes some off of the teacher's plate in terms of being able to problem solve on certain students with certain strategies. So really positive results for them as a district. They went out, and the numbers might be off just a little bit, but they were 60%, I think they were above grade level. And I think after the second year, they were at 90% above grade level in terms of their reading scores. Now, if I talk a little bit more.
Please do.
Okay, yeah, so, when we look at, when we started, we knew that there was not an issue, but we had concerns about some of our reading scores. So, historically, when we look at Fourth Elementary, when we had some of our best reading scores, was really after, and I talked earlier a little bit about the grant, whenever we got the reading program, Scott Forsman, we had some really great scores implementing that program. And one of the best benefits of that program was that it came with a literacy coach. We had Barb Lovely in the district, and she was able to work with teachers in the classrooms, really getting to do what's best for students. So that's really what kind of came up with the idea of getting a coach, because we're looking at closing the gap for a lot of these kids. And the best way to do it to reach as many kids as possible, we think, is getting a coach in the classrooms to work with the teachers and reach those kids and close that gap. So this idea really comes from good practices 13 years ago, really within our own district. So we don't have to look hard to find the things that we need to do to not just do better, but close the gap from COVID. We were doing a lot of those things right within our district. So in a way, this is kind of going back to some of our best practices that we given up over the years.
Can I just, through the conversation too, which was interesting, was that we met with the principal, the superintendent, we met with 2 coaches, that it doesn't only just target students who are falling behind, it literally targets all students. So you're looking at data, you're sorting them, you're finding students that are not meeting standards, you're finding that are partially, and then those that exceed, and you make plans for each group of students. And so it's not just focused on the students that are struggling. So it's really working with effective strategies for all students. So it's a very, and you're empowering students with a skill set that they're going to carry through this coaching cycles last about 6 weeks. So the skill sets that you work with the teachers carry over to maybe another group of students when the coach is not there helping them out. So you're really empowering teachers with skill sets that they may not even be aware of, because when you're in your classroom, you don't get to see what's going on in others. So they've been doing it for 5 years, and it's been a really, really great.
We have some really great teachers, but you figure when and I'm talking primarily those lower grade levels, there's a lot going on in an average day in those lower grade levels. So to tell a teacher to focus on the instructional strategies that are going to help move the needle for English language arts is a big ask when they've got to worry about face masks on kids and snots and boogers and miss that one touch me and all of the moving parts that go on. Did I count my lunch right today? There's a lot going on. So to have a person dedicated to focusing on this and helping each teacher focus on that in their classroom, we just really think that this model really makes sense. And as I shared with you early on, 20% of 1.8 million that we need to use to close these gaps, I think this has to be one of our primary pilots that we really try out and see if, throughout next year, if it's working. So our proposal to you is to allow us to post a position for a student-centered coach. Obviously, we would post in-house first. We think there would be some of our current staff that would be really good in this position, because one thing that we know in speaking with other school districts is it has to be a right fit. It has to be somebody that your teaching staff is going to trust. They're going to want to collaborate with. It has to be somebody who's not going to come in there and think that they're going to tell you what they. That's why administrators are not a good fit for something like this. It has to be one of them. It has to be a colleague. It has to be, somebody in the trenches. If the selected candidate does not have the student-centered coaching experience or coursework, we require them to participate in the summer cohort for a student-centered coach, an online course. And there are opportunities right now that are open for this summer to get a baseline of those concepts. We would progress monitor the gains made by tracking the student data specific to those students who have had teachers in the coaching cycles. And then the direct supervision, as I mentioned, would be in coordination with Mr. Neto, but also with Ms. Shasti to provide guidance to this coach. And then based on the data that we collect next year, we would ultimately like to come back to you next year at this time, or maybe sprinkle out throughout the year and share what we've learned, and then make a determination for the following year if this is something we want to continue to fund now with COVID monies, but into the future if it's something that's really showing success.
I have one question then.
Yep.
First of all, it is a new position. Second of all, is I thought those lesser funds were for 3 years.
They are, well, it's because we're getting them in 2021, but they go till 23. So essentially they're funding the 21-22 school year and the 22-23 school year. Okay. Yeah.
Does this only pertain to ELA?
It's no, it's right across the board. Our focus in early elementary is primarily reading, writing, and math. So those would be the highlighted. And we talked about really focusing on those lower elementary levels first, especially the first, quarter, half of the year. And then once that coach gets comfortable, seeing if they have the capacity to expand into grades 2, 3, 4 at that time.
It's a 6-week cycle. How many teachers do they work with in that cycle?
Can I answer?
Yeah, sure.
So the 6-week cycle, they usually recommend either one teacher, or you can do a group of teachers. They don't recommend doing more than 4 teachers. So it would make sense to do a grade level so that you're kind of all working on the same thing. And they could probably manage more than one cycle at the same time. So they could be working with grade 1 or grade 2 through that cycle. Then they can come back and cycle through with the same group. So depending on success, because during this time, there will have to be some downtime for the coach to plan, prepare, look at the data, because I think looking at the data collectively is a good thing, a skill set to do, but also what are the resources and help kind of strategize. So there will have to be some time built in. So creating a cycle, I'm thinking you could probably handle 3 cycles at a time, but maybe for the first time, someone might just want to be doing 1 so that they can learn the ropes. There's a lot of data and a lot of documentation on the part of the coach. I have all of the information, but they keep track of all of this stuff, and it says like how students are doing, how the kids are categorized, what strategies, what practices, what recommendations, and they co-teach. They can micro-teach, they can do modeling of lessons. There's a variety of different tools that they can use, and then they report out. So what they start doing too is collecting information on students that's transferable from the coach from year to year, so that when that student moves grade levels, the coach knows automatically what works for that student. So, I'm not sure how many was, I can call you Leslie, sorry.
I answered both.
I think at the beginning, it might be a little bit, less, but I think that the capacity of the coach would depend on who it is. But, yeah, from all the research I've done and the course that I took, this is really very results-based kind of approach that has the greatest impact on teaching strategies, instruction in the classroom that I've seen.
What's going to be the educational background required for this person?
Teaching.
There has to be a teacher.
Yeah, and what I'd like to do is approach the union and allow them to give us a little bit of flexibility so that our in-house candidates feel comfortable about taking this opportunity, because if they know it's only going to be for a year or 2, they may be reluctant to step into that. But I want to have conversations with the union to say, listen, if we're okay, we can allow a teacher to do this. Their seniority and their grade level is not impacted. It's essentially a temporary placement to try this pilot program. I think it's important that we allow our qualified teachers to step in and do this.
I'm assuming that if we did that, they would stay in their same paid position.
It would be part of the contract.
I like it. I worry about two things. One being, like you said, there's a lot going on to manage, and I worry about it being something else. I know it's help,
Mhm.
but like, when a small child tries help in the house, it's not always quite so helpful right at the beginning. And so, but I know long-term, it's a helpful thing. The other thing that I worry about is taking a teacher who's probably, if they're going to be doing this, probably really good at being a teacher.
Yeah.
And leaving a vacancy there that needs to be filled, especially if it's probably going to be temporary, just
Yeah.
worrisome.
We've talked about that as well. We've had some educational technicians that have really stepped up this year, and they've filled in for some I don't want to say long-term teaching placements, but when we had quarantines and we had all that, we had ed tech step in and do a bang-up job, and some of them aspire to be teachers and are ready to be conditionally certified. I think we have an opportunity to get new young blood in the classrooms. And I think this is a good time to do it. Would you?
I agree.
Okay.
Need a motion?
Is there a second? Any more discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous?
Assuming then we're gonna talk about this when we meet with the union, when we do the negotiations.
Yeah, I don't know that I want to make it formally go into the teacher contract,
Okay.
but I want to have a conversation with Doug first, and then we can bring it up, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll talk to him tomorrow.
Thank you.
New business.
We do have a resignation of an ed tech one-on-one at Portland Elementary School, and I apologize, I should have brought this to you last time. But I did share an email with you, and it's an email from Danielle Daigle to Jill Kelly, just expressing that she really enjoyed, but COVID-19 has been a lot, so I move to accept the resignation of Danielle Daigle.
So motion, Barry. Second,
Second.
Toby, any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous?
We had an adjustment, we have a resignation of a VRMS social studies teacher. I've greatly enjoyed my time here at MSAD27, Valley Rivers Middle School for the past 3 years. My colleagues have become treasured friends and mentors. Although I am happy where I am, an opportunity came up that would greatly benefit my family, and I could not turn it down. I will be completing the 2021 school year at VRMS, but I'll be resigning my position at the end of my contract. I'm so grateful that I've worked with an amazing group of educators and everything I have learned with me in my next adventure as a 4th grade teacher at Madawaska Elementary School. This is Cassie Morno.
A motion to accept.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous?
And then another adjustment was a resignation of our continuing education secretary. I'm writing to inform you of my resignation from the secretary position at continuing ed, effective April 1, 2021. While it's an extremely difficult decision I'm making, I felt it's best for me to find employment in the field which I'm currently attending school for. This is from Alicia Levac.
We have a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Toby, second, any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous?
We do have a transfer. So you all know that Mary Willette is retiring. So Stacy did conduct some interviews of her current staff, and she is recommending the transfer of Catherine Brewer to the position of literacy, family literacy, thank you. And that's just a transfer, so I don't need a motion on that one, just wanted to give you that information. New hires. We do have a Fort Kent Elementary School Dean of Students recommendation. We interviewed 7 candidates on Friday, March 26th. Mr. Neto joined me, as well as Kathy Daigle, the guidance counselor, Rebecca Daigle, pre-K teacher, Lynn Floyd, grade 3, Kelly Markey, RISE facilitator, Rebecca Misha, the school nurse, and Abby Pooler, your board member. And in the end, we had 2 candidates that were neck and neck, but the consensus of the group was to recommend Kevin Anderson for this position. Very.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous.
Mr. Anderson is extremely excited to get started. We also had interviews on the same day for the athletic director teacher position. Mr. Coletta and Mr. Doucette had a team. They interviewed 3 candidates. And in the end, they are recommending Daniel Campbell for this position. Dan Campbell he's doing this job in Jonesport Beals. He is a physical education teacher / athletic director. He's originally from Caribou, wants to come closer to home, very familiar with our district, having competed against us when he was growing up in Caribou. So the recommendation is for Dan Campbell.
Motion to accept?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Does he have any kids? We'll bring some.
Can't ask that question.
We have an educational technician one-on-one, again, so that's for Danielle Daigle's resignation. We have a recommendation to fill with Mindy Jones. She's been substituting in that position for a month under Ms. Iris, and Jill is very confident that she's doing a great job, so the recommendation is for Mindy Jones.
Second.
Second.
Abby, second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous.
And then another addition, we have a TOPS Academy Learning Facilitator, but because of Catherine Brewer's move into early literacy, that creates a vacancy for her position. And Stacy did conduct interviews and is recommending Josh Nichols. Josh has been working in our PE program for a few months now, and interviewed very well. Feels that this is a very good fit for him. So the recommendation is Josh Nichols for TOPS Academy Learning Facilitator.
So moved.
Give a second. Barry, any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous.
So we have current openings. We have a school evaluator position. We've had now 2 or 3 applicants for that, so we are getting applications for that. We do have a continuing education secretary now opening, the RMS social studies teacher for Ms. Cassie Morno, and then science teacher at VRMS for Mr. Kevin Anderson, and we will be posting those tomorrow morning, bright and early.
Sports approval.
In your packets, you should have had the MPA baseball, softball, tennis, and outdoor track guidance. Just to kind of highlight a couple of points. All of these sports are considered moderate risk sports because they're naturally social distance. You know, picture a baseball field, players are spread out and not close to one another. They will be making some adjustments to where the umpire is located. The umpire will no longer be directly behind the catcher. They're apparently going to be behind the pitcher for baseball, and then a little bit further back for softball. So I'm not quite sure how that's going to work, but that's one change. Spectators will be limited to whatever the governor has in place. So as of March 26th, that was 75% permitted occupancy, and on May 24, it'll be 100%. I don't know what our outdoor permitted occupancy is at our baseball, softball field and tennis court, but I essentially think that we will allow spectators to come and enjoy. Spectators will have to wear the face covering, as well as the players, coaches, referees. And then geographic scheduling was recommended but not required. The MPA really wants to try to do a real playoff for this spring sport. So if our teams do qualify for playoffs, I'm hoping that we would allow them to go participate. We do have our outdoor, our track, that they do have meets outside of Aroostook County. So I'm hoping that we will allow them to do that as well. And I would
Motion to approve the MTA recommendation guidelines for spring sports.
That'd be second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous.
Lucy's turn.
In front of you, we already have the budget packet. And I've labeled them A, B, C, D, E, and so on. The first sheet we will look at is the A sheet, and that's the summary by types of expenses. So when I build a budget, I look at the current salaries, who's on, who's leaving, who's coming on board, and I price all the salaries, because they're our biggest ticket item. I price the health and benefits. I price the items that need to happen, your telephone, your electricity, your fuel, and those kinds of things, and whatnot. And I build a first draft of the budget as a whole, and then we go and dig deeper to see if we need to make cuts, if we've forgotten things and whatnot. This is the first draft, so don't panic. The bottom number is not where we want to be, and is not where we will be. So this is our first look at it to give you a sense of where we're at and what we've included. So the A
Actually,
sheet.
we had an uglier draft before this.
We have an uglier draft. They get prettier as we go along. So the first sheet is just a summary of by the types of expenses. So I total the total salaries all throughout the budget, because I have to report it in a certain fashion to the Department of Education. I have to build my budget the way that they want me to build the budget in terms of categories. So they want me to build it like cost centers. And in each cost center, there's a multitude of different expenses, but they repeat themselves throughout the budget. And then I summarize them in one sheet. So I have, our total salaries. In 2020-21, we had 7.2 million. In this initial draft, we had 7.5 million. So it gives me an increase of what we're looking at currently, and it's by category. So that kind of gives you a snapshot. Currently, we'd be looking at an 8% increase on the expense side of the budget. And then in the purple column, H, gives you what each group of expenses as it relates to a total budget. So salaries, I've got about 55% of my budget is salaries. 14% is health insurance, and 4% is salary benefits, and so on. And then the other items are, 2% for professional contract and leasing, including the legal. The assessment for Valley Unified is 2% and whatnot. And then the blue column shows you, as compared to last year, what is the proposed increase based on this first draft. Sheet B, the next sheet. This is a super summary, is what I call it. And it's by cost center, and by law, I have to report through by different, there's 11 cost centers in total, and this is the first level of summary. So total instruction, that total regular instruction includes anything that happens in the classroom. So your teachers, your pre-K level, your grades 3 to 8, your middle school, high school, anything that happens in the classroom, and gifted and talented. Special education programs is your second cost center. That includes anything that has to do with that group of students and the services that we are required to provide. Your speech, your occupational therapy, your social workers, your special ed teachers, and any of the other professional services that correspond to that. Special education programs also has a requirement that it's called maintenance of effort. And in very simple terms, that means that what you have spent in general on one of these students, you have to keep spending the same amount from year to year or more. You cannot spend less than what you spent in current year. So the only change that you could see up or down would be if you're providing more services, or if it decreases, you would have lost students that fall in this category. Career and technical education is a third cost center. That is what happens at the St. John Valley Tech Center. And that cost center is zero for us, unless we would have a situation where the budget that the Career and Tech Center received in any one year was not enough to fund the services that they need. And in this current year, we don't have to provide any additional funding. Other activities refers to co and extracurricular activities. So all our sports, all our math teams, the chess team, the activities that happen outside of the classroom but are correlated to the students, your drama clubs and whatnot. This is where that falls in. Student and staff support, that is anything to do that supports the classroom teacher or the administrator. So you've got your guidance, your school nurse, your library, your technology department. You've got your assessment, so your NWEAs and those types of things. That's where those costs fall. And Sarah, I see you taking notes. You don't have to. I've got enough information in the back that will provide you that.
I like it in my handwriting, so I can't read it later.
System administration is basically your board and the central office staff. School administration is the school principal and secretaries and their office. Student transportation is anything to do with the moving bus. Facilities maintenance is anything to do with the buildings, repair, maintenance, heating, and whatnot. The school lunch program is strictly the school nutrition, anything to do with providing and preparing and delivering school lunch. And continuing education program is the continuation program through Stacy's group. This is the MSAD27 portion of it, for a grand total of. So we're looking at, in this current year, we have a budget of 12.5 million. In this first draft, we'd be looking at 13.5 million. So an increase of about $1 million as the first draft. So that's the expense side of the budget. The C report is digging down even a little bit deeper. So when you're looking at the first, sheet B and all the green columns, green rows, you can follow them through all the next reports as well. I'm just showing you that as part of regular instruction, I have to break it down between elementary grades 3 to 8, elementary pre-K to 2, secondary grades 9 to 12, and gifted and talented. So the Department of Education dictates that I have to report based on these different subgroups. So I call them subgroups within the cost centers. And you can go down through and see what the changes were or are proposed so far. Report D is digging down even deeper. And here's where you start to see some of the subgroups and the types of expenses within those subgroups. So I'm showing you the total salaries for grades 3 to 8, the health insurance, salary benefits that correspond to that group, and subtotal for the grades 3 to 8. And then I do the same for pre-K to 2, and so on. So you can really dig down and see, where is the increase, what type of expenses are the increases and whatnot. On the first big sheet, E, once I've built the expense side of the budget, then we look at where's the funding going to come from to offset these expenses, because legally I cannot present a budget to the voters and without having determined where the funds come from. I can't plan for a negative budget. I can't plan for being overexpended. I have to identify where the fund's going to come from. You can build all the budget that you can, and you can come up with any number, but unless you can identify where the funds are coming from and have a realistic number as to what you can collect, your budget is really is not going to work. So we start with, what are we planning on carrying forward? We look at the local revenue. Where are the funds that are coming from the state? What are the numbers that they've identified in the ED279 report? Do we have any carry forward? Are we requesting anything specific to school nutrition program or continuing ed? We operate those as little businesses amongst themselves, so we identify if we need to go to the local taxpayer to contribute anything towards those two programs by themselves. We look at expected tuition and fees that come in from our tuition towns. So in this case, we have Allagash, we have Eagle Lake, we have Unorganized Territories, and the Winterville Plantation. So we look at the number of students that are there this year as compared to next year, and whether or not we expect an increase or a decrease. We look at other local revenue. So the transportation for tuition students is one that is a big ticket item. And the interest in funds, food services. What I didn't do for food services is one of those big unknowns again this year, because this current year and the end of last year was very difficult to project what we're going to do, because we had to kick into gear and deliver meals. So we had a hybrid year where we actually provided meals on site, and then at the end of the year, we delivered meals using our buses. This current year, we've also had a hybrid year where at times we were remote, and right now we're back into operation on site. So it's really hard to get a sense of what next year will look like as well. Our staff will be mainly vaccinated, so we expect our staff on site, but we really don't know what the student population is going to end up being, whether or not they're going to be vaccinated, or whether or not we will still have pockets of kids that will have remote work and whatnot. So it's, what I've done is I've done very minimal change to school lunch, to the nutrition program. I've left it pretty much intact. So I left the anticipated revenues about the same. Sales and refunds is usually minimal. It's either a garage sale or things that we've been able to sell and get rid of. Self-insurance funds for technology, that is all the laptops that the students have in their hand. We ask that they contribute $40 it's a self-insurance thing, so that if anything happens to it, it helps pay for the damage, and it also gives a buy-in to the student to take care of it. Building rental revenue is one of those things that this year we didn't rent anything. We normally rent a little bit every year. Next year, I really don't know what so I left that as no revenue, and if it comes in, great. Miscellaneous is minimal. The state revenue indicates where the funds are coming from the state. The EPS funding is what we get from the ED279. That did show an increase on the state contribution. The regionalization efficiency funding is the amount that we get specifically for having formed an ESC. Main care sees usually a small adjustment they make throughout the year. Adult education subsidy is specific to adult for continuing education. And the lunch subsidy, I've got two identified there. One is our normal subsidy, and one is a subsidy that we've done in excess because we've delivered remote meals. As I said, I left the school nutrition program pretty much intact. And Medicaid reimbursement are funds that we can claim back, and for the special ed population, there's a main care adjustment that we can bill back. And I basically look at what we've collected in the previous year and apply it as revenue for this year. So we've identified where the funds are coming from. The very last number that I plug in here is usually the blue, the item that I put in blue, and that's the additional local funds that we need to go collect from the locals over and above the required amount identified in ED279. So in this first draft, and I know that it's high, last year we would have asked for 997,000 in additional local. This first draft is asking for 1.6 million. So an increase of about 539,000 going to the locals. We know that that's not what it's going to be, but this is a very first draft. So the last sheet identified as mill would show you if we were to take this to the local, what would it look like in terms of a mill rate? So I update the valuations, I update the student counts, and I update the contribution based on, the first part is based on the required local as identified on the ED279 report by the state. And then the excess additional local funds, we have the cost shared formula that says whatever is in excess, we share 50% based on local valuation and 50% based on student population. So we would be looking generally at about a 12.7 increase for the towns, and that would translate to about a 1.36 mill rate increase. Again, this is where I said, don't panic. So that's where we're at today. It's our very first look. It gives us a picture of where, what do we have in here that, we would need to come down. The last sheet that I've given you is just typically, your salaries and benefits are your biggest part of the budget. So they're really and you want to keep people employed to the extent that you can. So where your first target is, you're looking at what do we need to do to pare this down, and you typically look at projects or technology, those kinds of things. The technology in here is specifically to either improve our infrastructure or improve our software or provide. We've really targeted to provide the services that we need to provide the remote learning. We really started in March 2020 in really good shape as compared to other districts. And it really served us well when we had to flip the switch and go to remote learning. We have to maintain that level of service for that infrastructure. The one thing that we can no longer ignore is the fact that we're not going to get a new school. So now we really have to put some funds into our existing schools because we had kind of put a lot of the things on hold until we really knew for sure. So what you have in front of your hands are the first part, are the reductions that we've already made to the budget, because we know that either we can include them in the ESSER funds, or that as of this morning, we really got the news that our Anthem Blue Cross increase came in at 0 for our district. Once again, I think it's our second, if not third year in a row. So that was really good news. I was able to reduce 77,000 out of the budget. And then we already identified things in the budget that we can remove in terms of facilities projects. We have a scrubber that we've already ordered because there really is a need. We're having a really difficult time keeping up the maintenance part because our drivers and our custodians have really had to ramp up our disinfecting and our cleaning. So you kind of have to shift things and this is really part of the disinfecting and cleaning piece. New stage bleachers, that's one of the projects that we're going to include in the ESSER funds, or the application. And then the two other ones for the floor tiles. One of the top priority items that we have to focus on, and this is, we'll discuss this with the facilities subcommittee as well, is the floor tiles that we have in our hallways and in the gym at Fort Kent Elementary and here in the hallway at Valley Rivers are asbestos floor tiles. And when asbestos floor tiles stop popping, they don't stop. And they're a real trip hazard. You can't just take an asbestos floor tile and replace it with a VTC tile. They're not the same size and they're not the same thickness. So we've got two options to replace. We've got, I removed the ones, and these are removing VTC tiles. Where these are primarily in the hallways, they're very high traffic areas. And we're proposing removing it with, replacing it with a product that would allow us to float over the floor tiles and put rubber. And then the maintenance would be a lot less. We wouldn't have to wax. And so the future maintenance would be a lot better. But that's something that we can discuss with the committee. The bottom part are items that are still in the budget. However, we will look to see if there's other sources of funding. The ESSER funds are very specific, and the CRF funds are very specific in that you have to tie things to COVID in order to be able to put them in those. And to date, these types of projects have not fit in there. You can't tie asbestos floor tiles to COVID. You can't tie fixing a roof to COVID. However, the rumor is, and we're hoping that it is, that ESSER3 funds will allow us to do some of these projects. And if we can get the prior approval, we'll remove these out of the budget and put them in ESSER3, provided we have an application approval. So that's just the first snapshot and the kinds of things that we are having to deal with, and we'll be looking further into. Any questions or concerns?
On that bottom one, the still in the budget, what's the top line say?
Oh, it's In the cafeteria, when we built that mini stage for the productions, now we have to bring the electrical up to code to fit that mini stage. So that's what that is. Some of these things that we may be able to tackle before June, or at least start the project before June. In the past, the other thing that we'll need to consider with the committee as well is, in the past, a lot of these projects, or the smaller projects, were always tackled at the end of the year. So as we see if we have funds that we're going to be carrying forward, we look in April, May, and June and see what can we accomplish before the end of June. Some of these projects we wouldn't have time to tackle. So every year that we attempt to tackle some of these projects this way, if the funds are not available, they're not in next year's budget, we can't tackle them again. So they keep being pushed down the road. We need to really come up with a plan that says each year we have monies in the budget so that we can tackle projects in the summer when students are not in and that are guaranteed that we have funds to do some of these. We're not looking to do them all in one year, but we need to have a concrete plan and some funds available for those types of projects.
And how are we tying new stage bleachers to COVID?
Social distancing. Well,
Those bleachers are typically used for graduation, but in the need of social distancing, so not only can you spread out in the usual bleachers, but you can now spread them out on the stage and on the.
Mr. Doucette very happy.
We are trying to be very creative in tying things to COVID, but there's some things that just.
What's nice is that superintendents are now exchanging ideas, and so we're helping one another. I figure, and like Lucy alluded to it, apparently there's roofing projects being approved now, because you can tie that to ventilation and, that type of thing. So we'll see how that goes. I know that our window project at Fort Elementary was one of the first, and now everyone's redoing windows, so.
Some of the projects that we've identified there, like the doors to ceiling, they're original to the building. So we're at the point where we really can't kick those ones down the road. We do have roof leaks. So, we will be leaving some of these things. If we can't get them in use, or we'll have to leave some in the budget because we just can't. But top priority is your roof leak and your asbestos floor tile.
Thank you, Lucy. Get a motion to go into executive session.
Second.
Yeah, Lisa.
Lucy, want these all back?
Yeah.